Hey guys, my name is Cicabeot1. By now, I would have put out a video ranking every song on the most recent Billboard Hot 100 year-end, but so far, that hasn't happened. And that's mostly due to intimidation from how labor-intensive it was turning out to be for 2022. The script, as I had written it up to the point that I stopped, would have been about the length of the 2013 video I made last year, around 48 minutes, and I hadn't even gotten through half the year-end. And given how long I had to go not just in writing, but in the eventual editing process too, I decided to scrap the video entirely so that I could work on other projects. However, I did still want to do something to look back at some of the blind spots I had last year, give some thoughts on songs, and make sure some of the work I've already put into this doesn't go to waste. So I figured this pseudo-commentary style could help make this much less labor-intensive and not make this video later than it already is. I'm going to be giving some thoughts on only select songs off the year end, mostly the ones I find most interesting for that treatment. To make up for leaving some songs off, here is a Google spreadsheet of what my rankings would be for the 2022 Billboard year end. The highest tier of songs I never ended up properly ranking for the same reason my best list wasn't properly ranked, because at that point I'm splitting hairs. And they're not going to be talked about here anyway, because I've already covered them. We're gonna be starting with the songs towards the bottom of my ranking and slowly getting more positive. And hopefully it'll satisfy anyone who was curious about my thoughts on the year. Also, we'll be keeping clips of the songs to a minimum since this is inherently structured differently from my typical lists or rankings. And now, on with the show. This would have topped my worst list if I made one. Well, aside from Handsomer by Russ, but that missed the year end by a mile. I don't like how constantly dehydrated Doja Cat sounds throughout, how obnoxious her inflections are. I don't like the wiry, wacky for the sake of wacky beat. It's all the qualities of Doja I've always disliked about her taken to the extreme. This should have stayed as a deep cut.
She likes it when I wear a suit. Pick a favorite movie.
Yeah, this is maybe one of the worst sounding country songs I've ever heard. I never got the appeal to this. It's purposely sleazy with a leering, negging tone that tries to pass itself off as sexy, and I hate it. The same attitudes that made me noxious with bro country, but somehow done even worse. Also, there's a weird shout out to Bose speakers in the chorus, and I don't think this song would sound any better coming out of one of those, I'm just saying.
Take my hand, let me make you mine. I'm through waiting, taking my time.
Took me a while to come to this conclusion, but this is absolutely worse than just the way. White bread and sappy and irritating. Matt Thomas says that he's the last guy you'd expect to go soft for a song like this, but he's the lead singer for a boyfriend country band, so he's actually one of the first. Maybe he planned to make this song when Parmalee was a new metal band. Yes, that happened, look it up.
Corners in the paddock in my piece. I'm pushing P. Cop new helmets for my P. We don't want no peace.
Probably the most boring hit of the year. People were trying to meme the use of the letter P and some of the stupider lines, but even with that, there's never been any replay value for me. Boring beats, boring gimmick.
Now I'm just trying to keep my daughters off pole when my son's out of jail.
I didn't completely hate this for a while, but once I caught on to how smug and irritating Hayes was being here, it fell apart quickly. Mostly the line about how he married up and his wife married down, which, even as a joke, that's a painfully boomer sentiment that burns any benefit of the doubt I could give this. Not as bad as some of his other hits, but far from good.
Lucky, lucky girl. She got married to a boy like you.
A trans woman hit number 1. I should be happier about this. Tries to be dark and operatic and overdoes it to the point of this just sounding bad. I don't mind this as a sinful song by two gender non-conforming people with shock value, but this is too much even for me. Also, Kim Petras doesn't seem like she'd be up my alley due to her obsessions with painting herself as a slut and her penchant for hyperpop. Bad Bunny had a lot of hits this year, and this was my least favorite, but that mostly comes down to Chencho Corleone, whose inflections and vocal production are unbearable for me. He's really obnoxious here, and I don't dig the sinister-sounding beat either. There were much better beats on this album. And of course, the knowledge that the lyrics here are pretty horny, at least according to Genius's translation, doesn't help. I can tell this would have made this even more uncomfortable if I could understand it.
I need something
stuck up for Morgan Wallen's other hits this year, but this was the one I couldn't stand. Weak beats, pathetic and cringy lyrics that can't even make its central pun funny, and the trap and dance elements are badly implemented, which was kind of a theme for the album this ended up on too. And for how much I grew to like a number of this guy's songs, this one stands out as a dud. I generally like OneRepublic, but this doesn't do anything for me. The vocal production is too overwhelming, the chorus is kinda weak. It reminds me of Cage the Elephant in some not-so-positive ways. Also, this being made for the new Top Gun sequel is all sorts of perplexing for me, considering the original was promoted by Danger Zone, which is an incredible song. This just feels disappointing, especially since I know this band can do better.
Bad bitch, I could be a fantasy. I could tell you got big, deep energy.
I didn't know this used the same sample as Fantasy by Mariah Carey at first, so this didn't bother me that much initially, but once I actually heard Fantasy, this soured on me pretty quickly. The flair I heard in Bitch from the South years ago feels lost at this point, and now Lotto's just doing things that Doja Cat and Megan Thee Stallion do, but without much creativity. I don't quite hate it, but it's nothing special. I was excited for this when it was announced, but was disappointed when it ended up being a pseudo mashup of a bunch of old Elton John songs. It leans too much into trying to feel transcendent and nostalgic without really having much of a satisfying payoff. Just meanders, things kinda happen, Dua Lipa comes out as a trans man, I may have made that last one up, just kind of a nothing song. I don't think this concept could have worked. Trying to contrast something juvenile like reciting the alphabet with a bitter, vulgar breakup song. Gail was 17 when she recorded this, not 7. She's too old for this. I guess maybe this could have worked for some kind of South Park skit, but as a sludgy breakup rock song, not really doing it for me. I have heard that her other songs are much better than this, which in a way does make me happy though.
Damn, I knew you tripping. We could have been superstars. Can't help it, now I'm reminiscing.
What would we do without Kodak Black around, right? I actually kinda liked this one at first thanks to the child choir bits. Those are pretty catchy, but this didn't stand up to repeat listens. Kodak does his whole Kodak thing and is uninteresting in that. It's a diss towards someone I don't care about. Just an unremarkable song that I can't believe was able to finish in the top 10 of the year end. I know this is a weird thing to complain about, but for me, for years, crossing your fingers has meant that you're hoping for something to happen. So the central line where Lauren accuses her ex of crossing his fingers when saying he loves her feels pretty weird. Also, she thinks she can give songwriting advice, which feels a bit weird considering she had mostly done covers for American Idol before releasing this song. Otherwise, this is kind of a boring, nothing special ballad to me.
I can lick it, I can ride it while you slipping and sliding. I can do all them little tricks.
Hey, a Nicki Minaj song that managed to remain a hit after the first week. This one doesn't really grab me though. The use of the sample is neat, I guess, but the hook just doesn't have the same sort of energy or appeal as something like WAP. The hypersexuality here just isn't funny or that enjoyable, especially the spelling bits. But at least it's better than some of her other more recent attempts at hits.
Gotta throw a party for my day ones. They ain't in the studio, but they'll lay some.
Drake released 2 bad albums last year, and it was funny to see that the hit from the first House album was the one non-House song. It's also funny because it's unfocused as all hell. Feels like at this point Drake just loves doing 2-part songs a la Life is Good just for the hell of it, but he didn't come through with much of a hook this time. The 21 Savage verse amuses me for the Will Smith slap reference, especially considering he made a song for the Chris Rock Saw spin-off Spiral, but other than that, there's not much to this one. Most of this song I find annoying, like the repetition of syllables in the chorus, or the weird wooden hit of percussion that plays every so often, but when I get to Doja's final verse, that's when it starts to click for me. It is aggressive and raw, and strikes a great balance of Doja's attitude and personality. If this had more consistently good elements, this really could have been something special.
'Cause sometimes I look in her eyes and that's where I find
Former YouTube nerds becoming legit hitmakers is just something I'm gonna have to get used to, isn't it? I really dig Slow Dancing in the Dark and Give Me Love, but this one's just okay. This song's appeal comes from it being lightly toxic. I don't have a problem with that, but it's not particularly satisfying in that toxicity either. It sounds nice, but it never really builds to much. It's no easy on me to compare it to another song that famously lacks drums.
It's gonna be the last night coming in here, drinking all by yourself.
I have been waiting for years for John Party to make a year-end, and he finally did it! No matter what, I was always going to celebrate that occasion, but I do wish I liked the song more. Party is the kind of guy with enough charm to make a hookup at a bar song like this work, but he doesn't really elevate it to anything special, sadly. It's not on the same level as Dirt on My Boots or Heartache Medication by a long shot, but I'll take what I can get.
Oh girl, I like you, I do. I wanna be a friend, go shopping in a Benz.
People seemed to really hate this one, but I thought it was alright. It's too cute for me to have any beef with it, even if it barely makes sense for Post Malone or Doja Cat. Plus, it does have that off-putting line about being surrounded by hoes and just wanting a good girl. Okay. It does play a little better with the rest of the album being a little reprieve from a dark angst fest, but it wouldn't have been my choice for a hit from this album.
I could do this for hours and hours and hours.
This one I mostly want to bring up against my better judgment because it's kinda hot. A bit too slow for me to fully love it, but that line about being devoured really works for me. And I already regret saying that, let's move on.
And I can put you in.
Unfortunately, I can see this as being a bit of a career killer for Jack Harlow. It feels like it's already been forgotten, but I stand by what I said. I think this does a brilliant job of integrating its sample. It sounds luxurious, Jack has good interplay with the sample, and I feel like if he had tried to finish the whole spelling bit, it would have felt a little too clunky. It's not his best, but it's not his worst either. I think this deserved to hit number 1.
I'm just trying to ball and live. 100 mil, I'm calling deals. I'm the boss, pay all the bills. I'm the golden child for real.
2022 was a rough year for Lil Baby. Aside from Two Step, I didn't really find any songs from him I could really sink my teeth into like the past couple years. Even In a Minute feels like kind of an unmemorable, disposable song. It's decent, but nowhere near as impressive as Every Chance I Get or Ramen and OJ, although I do appreciate the line where he indicates that one of his highlights of his career was sharing a stage with Billie Eilish. There's something nice and wholesome about that kind of shout out to an artist I have an affinity for.
And if you wonder if I hate you,
I didn't care much for SZA's SOS released last year, but I do have a soft spot for this single, the sort of hazy, frustrated track that's decently relatable. I do know songs in that vein that hit me a lot harder, but I can't knock this one at all. It's an approach that makes SZA more palatable to me than usual, I guess. Also, you can't tell me this song doesn't use automatones. There's no way that's not what that is.
stupid boy making me so sad. Didn't think you could change this fast.
From a Billie Eilish knockoff to a rollicking pop rock song about jealousy. Yeah, that threw me off guard, but it's pretty good. I do think Tate's voice, or at least the vocal production, is a little too thin for this to be a complete slam dunk, but I'm not about to resist being pandered to when they do it right.
I see it, love it, I see it. Yeah, that's just life, baby.
This is the other side of the coin I touched on with When You're Gone. Camila showing the maturity to move on while taking Ed Sheeran along for the ride. I do like how the Latin style is less tense than she's done in the past and much more jovial. It's a breath of fresh air for her, though it's not quite as satisfying as I'd like it to be. Camila's fine, Ed's fine, it's just fine. But good for Camila that she's doing alright.
You gave me eyes, Willie girl, you gave me golly Jones. You turned me on.
Would it be fair to call this Kane Brown's most country hit to date? This is a bit cheesy and bombastic with its neo-traditional style, but it mostly works for him. The swing time, the love and appreciation for older country music, it's really fun. And that false ending gets me nearly every time. I don't expect this to be much more than a one-off gimmick, but it is a good gimmick.
I'm VIP, ay.
Saluden a Titi, vamos a tirarnos.
One of the most out there of the Bad Bunny hits of the year, and also one of the best. The beat here is mostly percussion, and the drums are very lively. It feels like it's ready for the clubs, even for areas that don't primarily speak Spanish, though I feel like it loses a lot of its steam with that beat switch. Some neat, creepy-sounding space synths, but it's not on the same level as the selfie, say cheese, you know?
You pray for my demons, girl, I got you. Every time I sip on codeine, I get vulnerable.
Future gets experimental with a love song, and it ends up being one of his biggest hits ever. I consider myself pretty cynical when it comes to Future, but I can't deny this works really well. The Thames sample is great, Future's auto-tuned crooning is surprisingly effective, but it's let down by the Drake feature, sadly. He's a jerk on his verse, and I don't think he's a good fit for the song. Without that, this could have almost been as good as Where Ya At, my personal favorite Future song.
'Cause there we are again on that little town street.
I still can't believe the album that had We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together and 22 also had this. This is a very lovely song, and especially dense with the 10-minute version that most people were listening to in 2021, and it feels like it's earned that length. Although, to be petty, this doesn't still floor me in the same way a lot of Taylor's other best songs continue to do outside of its length. It feels a bit standard for her otherwise. Plus, with Red Taylor's version, I discovered The Last Time with Gary Lightbody of Snow Patrol, and that might be my favorite Taylor Swift song of all time now. So, you know, nothing personal.
Damn straight. You're killing me, man. You know I've always been.
I love a good double entendre when used right, and Scotty McCreery singing about the heartbreak his favorite songs now give him works really well. I'm sure Old Dominion have done a song with this concept before, but I like the warmth Scotty brings to it, contemplative and heartfelt. And in most other years, this might have stuck out as one of the best country hits of the year. In 2022, though, there was a little bit more competition. An 80s classic revived by Stranger Things. It is really bizarre to think my generation has its own Bohemian Rhapsody return run now. Admittedly, this was tricky for me because I was introduced to this song through a cover by Meg Myers in 2019, which I believe has much better production. The original's little synth riff sounds like a wet fart to me. But despite that, the composition and Kate's voice were excellent enough for me to still smile whenever I heard this.
Just pressure like a grip, and it won't let go. We don't talk about Bruno, no.
So how about that Encanto, eh? 2 year-end hits, and both pretty good for different reasons. Surface Pressure has a nervous energy and scatterbrained tone that is definitely relatable to my generation. Yeah, Jessica Darrow's singing isn't technically great, but I think it works for the character. And We Don't Talk About Bruno really does recapture the magic of Let It Go, but with a lot more going on, and I think it stayed a lot fresher. Unless you're a school teacher, maybe. I've gone back and forth on these two songs for a year or so, but at the moment, I think I prefer Bruno. The things it does with giving so many characters the spotlight, even all at once, is still really impressive to me.
Se miró al espejo y vio que está bueno todo, vio que está bueno todo y quiere ver.
After how much I disliked Todo de Ti, it surprised me that my favorite Bad Bunny year-end hit ended up being the Raul Alejandro collab. I love the spooky dance vibe. Heavy reverb, the repetition of the word party pitch shifted all over the chorus. Having to internalize so many Bad Bunny songs all at once was admittedly really daunting to me, since I'm still pretty ignorant of Latin music, but I internalized Party immediately. It's the one that sounds like a haunted dance floor. What's not to love?
I'm just a long-haired son of a sinner.
This did not make the year-end, but when this video was meant to be a full year-end breakdown, I included this song along with a few others to offset the 4 Christmas songs that made the list, since this would have likely made the list if not for those songs, according to Chart Essentials. Also, I originally intended for this to have a small section on my best list before it was cut for time, ironically with the intention that it'd be in the year-end ranking. Whoops. So, here's me salvaging this. This is a weird song and artist, but I think I like it for a lot of the reasons I like the Morgan Wallen songs I do. It's very confessional, and it swells pretty beautifully. Though Jelly Roll does have a much huskier voice than Wallen, and it lets him sell the bad boy, religious heretic image he's going for. Kinda sad this missed to the year end.
I love it when you do it like that, and when you're close up, give me the shivers.
The consensus is that this was better than Bad Habits, though I didn't really think it was as interesting. It's still a lot of fun and love-struck and happy in that familiar Ed Sheeran way, so I'm not about to argue against this being a hit. Though from the same album, it is a shame that Overpass Graffiti and Two Step didn't really see the same amount of success. Yes, again, I'm being petty. And with that, I can finally leave 2022 behind me forever. I did only talk about a fraction of the year end between this, my best list, and the repeats I've previously talked about as part of 2021, but to me, those are the songs I find the most interesting. If you're interested in my thoughts on a song I didn't mention here, feel free to leave a comment asking me what I think. And while you're at it, feel free to tell me how you thought about any song from 2022. Again, I apologize for how late into 2023 this has come out, and sorry that it's much smaller scale than I've typically done for these kinds of videos, but hopefully it at least gives some kind of closure to a year that was pretty difficult to grapple with. Special thanks to Rachel, aka Snickerblizzlez, who drew the thumbnail. I'm glad this thing didn't have to go to waste because I love it. I've got more stuff planned for 2023, but for now, take care.